Hello and welcome once again. Good afternoon, everyone. This is UTM Use of English e-class, and it is all about confidence building in preparation for UTM Use of English. And like we know, this topic is concentrated on sections and question types. And this is part 1. Right, so it's all about building confidence, UTM Use of English, sections and questions type, part 1. I am again your preceptor Samuel Ike Emochogo. Now let's quickly take a look at what we have here today. So first, the introduction, the exam structure. It is important and imperative to understand the exam structure of UTME. Now, first and foremost, you have the section A, which is made up of comprehension and summary. Section B, you have the lexis and structure, and section C, oral forms. And so use of English, UTME, is actually broken down into 3 sections as seen on the screen here. Now that said, it's important again to take a look at these sections in terms of the questions they contain. Alright, now I'm going to break them down this way. Within comprehension and summary, it is made up of, that particular section is made up of A, comprehension passage, just one comprehension passage of 5 questions, and then after that you have another passage known as closed test. I'm going to explain what that term means, closed test. It is made up of 10 questions, and then you also have a reading text. This is a short novel, a brief novel, otherwise known as a novella, written by Kabir Alabi, and the novel is titled Lekki Headmaster. Okay, now 10 questions will be extracted from that novel. All of these constitute what we refer to as section A, and I hope this is clear. Okay, you also have other sections like section B, which I will share with you much later. Now this is section B, made up of antonyms, 5 questions, synonym, 5 questions, and then sentence interpretation, 5 questions. Please, when you hear sentence interpretation here, we're actually talking about questions that are idiomatic or figurative in terms of their form and nature. All right, now you also have what is called the sentence completion, 10 questions, otherwise known as grammar questions, 10 questions. And finally, you have the oral forms, made up of 10 questions. Oral forms, we're going to be looking at these shortly after now. So these are part A. Part B is this, which will be shared later, and then part C will be shared much later. In all, you have 60 questions in UTME exams. All right, so take note of all of this. Now quickly, let's delve into a more practical aspect of this class. Now for section A, like we talked about, summary, comprehension and summary is actually made up of a passage. That passage could be descriptive, it could be narrative, it could be expository, it could be argumentative, but all we know that is that it is a passage, and then 5 questions will be drawn out of that questions. All questions will be multiple choice questions. Now followed next after this will be what is called the closed test. The closed test, of course, has 10 questions. It's actually a passage too, but then some words within the passage will be withdrawn, okay? Will be withdrawn, and then you trace the appropriate word that should be placed within that withdrawn spaces in the passage, which is called the closed test, and it is worth 2 marks per question. And so it is usually 200 words long passage, and you have 10 questions there. Then the next one to note is the reading text. Please note, the reading text, like I said, is a novella, or is a novelette, so to say, a short novel in other words, and it is written by Kabir Alabi Garba. It is titled The Lekki Headmaster. 10 questions will be drawn from this novel. Remember, all of these questions will be multiple choice questions. Now let's take a look at something a bit practical with this question. Now this is a typical comprehension question, and then again you have that instruction in red font. Read the passage carefully and answer the questions that follow. So this is a typical example of how a comprehension passage would look like. And then 5 objective questions will be drawn from this passage. An example is what we see here. Look at that question. Which of these is not among the reasons given by the author for enumerating the examples of the current development? All right, now you may not bore you with reading the details of this passage, but the appropriate answer here is actually option C. Yes, option C is the correct answer here. The inconvenience currently being experienced will go on indefinitely. Okay, so that is the answer here. Option C is actually the answer. And then again, we look at the next question here, which is the cloze test. Now, we've been talking about cloze test. What is it all about? It is something you know. Like I said, from here, you find questions 16 to 15. Remember, the comprehension passage we saw earlier indicated that we are going to see questions 1 to 10. Take note. Question 1 to 5, and then in cloze test you have questions 6 to 15. That is 10 questions. Now, here's an example of a cloze test. Can you see that some words are actually removed from this passage? And then again, you will see the options provided this way. Look at the options provided. Can you see how the options are provided? Exactly something of this nature. All right, so it is now left for you to pick the option within this line for number one, and then pick the appropriate one to replace it. All right, I think I'm going to share some bit of answers to this. So in question number one, we're going to take adoption as the answer. Significant increase in adoption of digital printing machines leading to improved productivity. So number 2 will be option B, and then number 3, and reduced turnaround time. So it should be option A in number 3. And then number 4, the shift has also resulted in decline. That is number 4, option B, in the decline. In a decline in the demand for skilled operators. So in this case, number 5 will be technicians, not operators here. Okay, and a greater emphasis on number 6 will be routine, right? Option A, routine maintenance to ensure optimal performance of equipment, and that is the appropriate answer. Okay, so this is how, of course, it looks like when we talk about cloze test. Now you know what it is. All right, now the next one will be questions 16 to 26. Question 26 to 16 to 26. That is 10 questions from Kabir Alabi Karwa's Lekki headmaster. Now, from the text, these questions were drawn. Okay, so we'll take a look at the answer and what the answer portends there. What was the principal's approach to addressing bullying, right? Okay, the appropriate answer is actually there. He implemented policies to promote respect and understanding. That is option B. And then number 2, how did the principal view the role of extracurricular activities in education? Okay, so he believed they were essential for holistic development. Okay, and that is option A as the correct one. Number 3, how did the principal respond to the school's performance in academic competitions? And of course, we'll find it in option C. He celebrated achievement and used them as motivation. So this is just the nature of the question, and I hereby supply more explanations to the answer. So these are the answers here. You pick based on this. It's an objective test. So you just click because it is computer-based exam. All right, that said, we are going to call it a day here, and I hope you now know your question types, part A. All right, we continue with the next section. In other words, part 2 and part 3. Bye for now.